Today we're discussing the latest in OpenAI drama, which at current is drama yet to materialize. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. There has been for some time a growing question around the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI. A relationship that Sam Altman had once called the best bromance in tech has increasing signs of trouble. At the end of last week, the New York Times went out of its way to get more details around this and interviewed 19 people familiar with the relationship between the companies. They write, financial pressure on OpenAI, concerns about its stability, and disagreements between employees of the two companies have strained their 5-year partnership. Now, of course, one of the places that these questions started to come up was around the firing and then rehiring of Sam Altman last year. My feeling has been, even though Microsoft went out of its way to say they supported whatever happened in that situation, and you'll remember, planned on taking Altman and most of the team from OpenAI into Microsoft, behind the scenes, you have to think that just from a sheer fiduciary responsibility standpoint, Satya Nadella and Microsoft were going to have to start to carve out more space. They had seen how fickle the OpenAI board would be, and as we'll get into, OpenAI's board has a significant impact on how Microsoft's long-term relationship with OpenAI comes to an end. So let's get into some of the new details that came out, or at least got more clarity as part of this piece in the New York Times. Obviously, during previous fundraising rounds, Microsoft has been OpenAI's biggest investor. They bought roughly 49% of the company, or nonprofit, after spending around $13 billion. The latest round, which closed this month, did include Microsoft again, but as a much smaller part of the reported $6.7 billion in funding. What's more, OpenAI have also moved away from using Microsoft as their sole provider of compute, with reports that Microsoft couldn't keep up with the training needs of their next frontier model. OpenAI has now contracted with Oracle to build their next training supercluster, although the deal is technically structured through Microsoft to avoid breaking their exclusivity. Sources also made clear that the whole firing and rehiring of Altman last year did make Microsoft less interested in keeping the money spigot running. And then, of course, there's the question of this switch from a nonprofit to a for-profit. Microsoft has a massive ownership stake in a company that is about to go through one of the most controversial corporate restructurings in history. It is at this stage unclear exactly how OpenAI plans to morph into a for-profit, but most believe that it will involve a large payment to the not-for-profit. The Wall Street Journal reports that both companies have hired investment bankers to help negotiate how much equity Microsoft is going to get when OpenAI actually becomes a for-profit. Microsoft has reportedly engaged Morgan Stanley, while OpenAI is working with Goldman Sachs. It's also reported that Sam Altman has brought in Michael Klein, a former Citigroup banker who he has close ties with, as an additional consultant. Now, Microsoft's deal terms were not straightforward. They involved a huge chunk of future profits and control over some of the IP and research. They're not technically shareholders, but own profit participation units. This means that during the restructuring, basically everything is open to negotiation, including the share that Microsoft will own and the nature of their governance rights. This all gets even more complicated when you consider the current aggressive antitrust climate at the FTC, which would need to approve the deal. And as if that isn't difficult enough, OpenAI must convert to a for-profit within 2 years or risk investors from the latest round asking for their money back. Now, one of the biggest signs that Microsoft had started to move away from OpenAI was when they announced that they had basically aqua-hired staff from Inflection AI, including putting CEO Mustafa Suleyman in charge of a new AI division. According to the Times, this caused a major rift between the two companies. Some OpenAI executives and employees, including Mr. Altman, are angered that Mr. Suleyman is at Microsoft, according to 5 people familiar with the relationship. Mr. Suleyman's team is part of a group of Microsoft engineers who work directly with employees at OpenAI. Dozens of Microsoft engineers work on site at OpenAI's office in San Francisco and use laptops provided by OpenAI that are set up to maintain the startup security protocols. Some OpenAI staff recently complained that Mr. Suleyman yelled at an OpenAI employee during a recent video call because he thought the startup was not delivering new technology to Microsoft as quickly as it should. Others took umbrage after Microsoft's engineers downloaded important OpenAI software without following the protocols the two companies had agreed on. Now, it's very hard not to read that whole new division at Microsoft as a hedge against instability at OpenAI following the board controversy last November. Still, the biggest thing lurking, and I think, again, this goes back to that last fall controversy, is that one of the most unique terms in the deal between Microsoft and OpenAI is that their contract contains a clause that basically says that if OpenAI achieves artificial general intelligence, Microsoft loses access to OpenAI's technologies. As the Times puts it, the clause was meant to ensure that a company like Microsoft did not misuse the machine of the future, but today, OpenAI executives see it as a path to a better contract. Under the terms, the OpenAI board could decide when AGI has arrived. And that, my friends, is why the board behaving so crazily last fall had to have spooked Microsoft. If the board can just decide at any given time, oops, we've hit AGI, and that nullifies Microsoft's access, that is potentially a very dangerous situation. Some people are unsympathetic. Buco Capital on X writes, Microsoft deserves to get rugged if they signed a contract saying AGI means Microsoft loses access and OpenAI decides if AGI is achieved. Leon Palafox writes, I'm willing to bet this is the whole reason Sam has been saying they're about to get to AGI. Look, ultimately, this tie-up has been unique and precedent-setting when it comes to Silicon Valley. It was a relationship that was neither an investment nor a clean acquisition, and so of course there was going to be some challenge figuring out how to make it all work. I think that one can believe that both of these parties still are operating in total good faith with regard to one another, and still understand that it's going to be messy. Now, one other interesting detail before we get out of here. The Information last week published a piece about Greg Brockman coming back to OpenAI and all the challenges that might entail, but someone pointed out that in that article, one interesting little nugget is that all of the leadership changes might have actively impacted this latest fundraise. The Information writes, leadership changes may have already had an impact on OpenAI's fundraising efforts. Shortly after CTO Mira Murati announced she would be leaving the company, Apple pulled out of fundraising talks. In a meeting, CFO Sarah Fryer said Apple didn't give an explicit reason behind its decision, but she believed it was due to Murati's exit. Interesting times in the land of OpenAI. That, however, is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Until next time, peace.